You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oklahoma makes its first trip to Oxford, Mississippi. Hello, I'm Steven Willis of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We might be joined by guests in a little bit. We might not. If we need to, we will just vamp for a little bit. We'll have a good time. We'll get in the comments and do all of that stuff because it is game week. And honestly, I've been looking forward to this Ole Miss Oklahoma game ever since it showed up on the schedule. If you watched the show this morning, you know that I like Oklahoma. I am a fan of Oklahoma. They were my Big 12 team for the longest time. I mean, we go back to the Big 8 with Oklahoma, with Jamel Holloway and Keith Jackson and Barry Switzers and all those cats. So this game was going to be special, and I was excited for the Oklahoma fans to be able to come down and experience the Grove and experience a game day atmosphere at Ole Miss. And then lo and behold, they turn it into an 11 o'clock kickoff like an idiot. So Oklahoma is going to come down and be disappointed by the Grove, and everybody's going to have to say, well, you didn't really get to see it because the Grove at 11 o'clock is not the same for a nighttime game with the Grove or even a 2:30 game with the Grove. So I do apologize for that, Oklahoma fans, as well. So should be kind of interesting. I talked on the podcast earlier this week how the biggest mismatch in this game potentially, and this is probably why Ole Miss is favored by nearly 3 touchdowns at the moment on FanDuel, is the Ole Miss defensive line against the Oklahoma offensive line. You have an Ole Miss defensive line that is currently 7th in the country in sacks. An Ole Miss front 7 in defense that is 2nd in the nation in tackles for loss, going against an Oklahoma offensive line that is like 132 out of 133 in sacks this year. There should be no excuse not to get pressure on Jackson Arnold. Now, I think Joe John Finley is aware of that. I think Oklahoma is aware of that. And I think you're going to see Joe John Finley do a lot of the stuff that Jeff Lebby used to do running the offense, which means they're going to be heavy hitches. They're going to be heavy screens. They're going to get the ball out of Jackson Arnold's hand. They're going to try and help this offensive line out. Everything that we say that Ole Miss needs to do to their offensive line, I assume that Oklahoma is going to do that as well to help out Jackson Arnold. But if you look at it on the cuff, I think Oklahoma's going to try and run the ball. It's been really tough sledding to run the ball on Ole Miss this year. I think that Oklahoma is going to try and get the ball out of his hands. But in those moments to where Jackson Arnold has to throw the ball downfield, whenever Ole Miss can get a 3rd and 10, a 3rd and 15, that is when this defensive line could really hunt. We have to wait and see till the injury report comes out tomorrow. But Princely Amon-Mielen is kind of expected back. He played a little bit against LSU. I could figure after 2 weeks, he should be more than healthy to go in the game. Suntarine Perkins has been a revelation for Ole Miss at that jack position as well. Jared Ivey is in the top 5 or something in the SEC in sacks. And then you have Walter Nolan and J.J. Pegues, who the week off helped out as well. This is as healthy as this defensive line has been probably this season. So that's good news. Then when you add Chris Paul and you add TJ Daugherty and those players at linebacker, and just it looks like it's going to be really tough sledding against that defensive line and linebackers for that Oklahoma offensive line. That matchup is probably the reason that Ole Miss is a 20-point favorite in this game. And that is also probably the reason why Ole Miss is going to probably cover that line. Now, we all have to remember, Ole Miss was favored over Kentucky by about this amount. Kentucky was a team with an atrocious offense with a pretty good defense. Completely shut down the Ole Miss Rebels. Jackson Dart played terribly. Ole Miss ended up losing that game to Kentucky for inexplicable reasons. So nobody can just chalk it up in the win column, especially when Oklahoma, if you want to look at the blue chip ratio, they're at over 70%. And for those who don't know what the blue chip ratio is, those are the teams that have the talent on their roster to win a national championship because of reasons. And basically the number of 4 and 5-star players that are sitting on the roster, and I think at Oklahoma is at like 70%, or some ludicrously high amount. They're good. They're talented. They're schematically not where they need to be, and they made some mistakes in evaluation with the offensive line, and that has hurt Oklahoma. That is the reason they are where they are. They're not there because they have bad players. And I think Ole Miss fans need to keep that in mind when Oklahoma comes into Oxford, because there's always a chance they rise up and get you. And Lane Kiffin's at the point to where over the next 5 games or so, he needs to put together some wins. He needs to string together some wins. He needs to win out. And with that Georgia game sitting on the schedule, that's going to be a difficult task. But it starts with Oklahoma on Saturday. That is a big moment for Lane Kiffin. Listen, another thing that is like the news that is going around Ole Miss at the moment is the offensive line is atrocious. The offensive line is terrible. The offensive line is not grading well. And I agree. Against LSU, they gave up, 5 sacks? Against Kentucky, they gave up 4. They've given up 17 entirely on the season. They only gave up 1 to South Carolina, which in hindsight looks really good. But in SEC play, they've given up 10 sacks, I think, over the course of the season. But when you look at the numbers of what is actually going on, against Kentucky, per drop back, Jackson Dart had 3.26 seconds to throw the football. That's an enormous amount of time. That is basically every sack that Kentucky got was coverage based. And this is with an offensive line that are run blocking this whole time with the way that Ole Miss runs RPOs, and especially third level RPOs and down the field stuff. Against LSU, they had 2.86 seconds to throw. Those 2 are the 2 longest time to throw the football that Jackson Dart's had this entire season. Ironically, the shortest period of time that he had was against Middle Tennessee, where he had 2.2 seconds. The point is, I caution everybody to look at it, and they're going to shuffle some stuff around, and they're going to do what they can do and all of that stuff. But don't just put it on the offensive line whenever the quarterback gets sacked. I'm telling you on that one. Just do not put it on the quarterback alone, or the offensive line alone, because there's several things in that can affect whether or not he gets sacked. Anyway, thanks for watching the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. When we come back, we will continue talking about the Oklahoma Sooners and things that are kind of on my mind at the moment. We'll talk about my debut with ABC 24 on Thursday and all of that good stuff. And if we have any comments in the comment section, we'll hit that as well. So stick around for that. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals who fit right for the role. That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has the tools to help you find the top professionals for your team faster and for free. From my own experience, hiring can be a challenge, especially when you want to make sure that you get the best candidates. I've used LinkedIn Jobs to fill key positions on my team, and the process was incredibly smooth. It made finding qualified candidates so much easier. The platform does all the heavy lifting, allowing me to focus on what really matters, and that is getting the right person on board. Here's the thing. LinkedIn just isn't a job board. It helps you connect with professionals you will not find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively looking for a new job, but who might be open to the perfect opportunity. In fact, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not using LinkedIn, you're kind of missing out. And get this, 86% of small businesses find a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So ready to make the right hire? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Hire professionals like a professional with LinkedIn Jobs. Have you ever heard of the South's favorite pickle? I'm talking about Stewart's Cajun Dill Pickles. If you think you don't like pickles, it's probably because you haven't tried these yet, honestly. These pickles are so fresh and crunchy, just the right amount of Cajun kick to keep you coming back for more. And they're not just delicious, they're also handmade by a family-owned company on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, so every bite is packed with authentic Southern flavor. But Stewart's doesn't just stop at pickles. They've got pickled green beans, okra, carrots, and asparagus too. Perfect for spicing up that snack game. So you can find these amazing products at Rouse's Market, Sullivan's Corner Market in Hattiesburg, and even some Winn-Dixies along the Gulf Coast. Or if you prefer shopping online, head to thepickledstore.com. Make sure you like them like and follow them on Facebook and Instagram. When you shop local and try these pickles, I guarantee you're not going to be disappointed. That's Stewart's Cajun Dill Pickles, the South's favorite pickle. All right. This is just a fantastic game. I'm looking forward to the Realtree aspect of this game. As you can see, the Realtree Galaxy pattern that I'm wearing right now, you can go to collegecornerstore.com and see what Scott has going on in the Realtree pattern. But this is the game where Ole Miss is going to break out the Realtree stuff. It should look absolutely fantastic. I like the way it looks, especially against my set, if we're going to be honest. But it's going to be fantastic. And this week, I'm going to continue that on Thursday. I have the crossover with the Locked On Sooners guys. Both of them, they're going to be on, and we're going to talk about the football game. On Thursday also, I am on the 24th Floor Sports Show talking with the boys at ABC 24 about this game. I'll start basically doing a weekly hit during football season as they get ready for it. Really good people. They sent me an email today with how to get logged on and everything. It's going to be awesome. But just so everybody knows that might be under a rock and not paying attention to my shows or anything like that, we kind of are in a partnership with ABC 24. They're going to have the entire catalog of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. It's kind of migrating over to the platforms right now. I'm going to assist them on their streaming products as well for Ole Miss games, handling that. And eventually they're hoping that that will end up on linear channels as well. So I could end up on linear channels. And this is important, right? This is the ABC channel in Memphis. So it's not only in the Ole Miss market, it is directly associated with the Southeastern Conference and Ole Miss. So this is huge. This is absolutely massive. And I appreciate that for everybody at ABC 24. So thank you very much for that. And we're going to have a good time. They're also going to promote my podcast on their newscast. And basically, it's just a fantastic deal. So again, thank you very much for that. So Oklahoma comes in, very good defensive team, by the way. Danny Stutzman is a legit linebacker. I think his name's Brian Bowen. I think that's his name. The safety, they have an All-American safety back there. He's the one that made a comment at the Manning Passing Academy that he was going to pick six Jackson Dart just randomly. It's like, why are you doing this, bro? You know, what's going on? And then I realized that Jackson Dart went on a recruiting visit to Oklahoma when he was going through the transfer portal. It all made a little bit of sense then. But when you look at what's going on between the two teams, it's like they tried to create some drama, but they just couldn't, because there's zero history between these two programs. This isn't like Oklahoma getting to play Missouri again, to where you had 100 years of Big 8 football to go back on. Or Oklahoma and Texas, where that rivalry and the hatred is absolutely real. Or even the Texas A&M game, to where there's several 30 years or so of playing, and you know, you have that game to where it was like 77-3 in the third quarter and all of that against Texas A&M. So there's even that level of history. There's no history between Ole Miss and Oklahoma. None. They played once in 1999, the last game of the 1900s. Ole Miss won that game on a last-second Les Binkley field goal. I remember that because my hotel caught on fire. And just to give my wife credit, my wife was quickly loading the truck while I was trying to look for a sock. And I've paid for that for the better part of the last 25 years. But it was kind of funny. The hotel was on fire. She was loading up the truck. So there's no history, like I said, between these games. Even Oklahoma and Arkansas, who's played 5-6 times, some kind of a ludicrous amount of not playing games for two schools that are 3 hours apart. They're in the same conference. Even they have more history than Ole Miss and Oklahoma. So it was safe for me. I talked about enjoying Oklahoma and having fun watching Oklahoma football. Like I said, Jamel Holloway, Troy Aikman, Barry Switzer, Keith Jackson, Brian Bosworth, all of those players, you just kind of enjoyed watching them play football and the way they had. And their big game over Thanksgiving weekend was against the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and it was on TV every single year like clockwork. And like I said, my uncle was a huge Nebraska fan, or is a huge Nebraska fan, honestly. So I had to find somebody to root for because my uncle was watching that game all the time. And everybody that has family members knows that a good chunk of them root for whoever you're rooting for, root against whoever you're rooting for. So I started rooting for Oklahoma in that game. Every single year watching that game, rooting for Oklahoma and driving my uncle absolutely mad. But because there was no chance of Oklahoma and Ole Miss ever intersecting. Honestly, there was no chance of Nebraska and Ole Miss ever intersecting, really. So this is a weird situation and one that I kind of have been looking forward to. In 2012, I went to the Grove and saw it when the Texas Longhorns came to Oxford. And I saw the basic zoo that was happening. I saw Bevo on the sideline, got my picture taken with Bevo in that game. It was cool. And this is a situation that was going to be equally as cool. Like I said, nothing but respect for Oklahoma. And I think that Ole Miss should win this game and should win this game by 2 or 3 touchdowns. But it's not something that I'm saying, hey, this is a program thing. This should always happen in the typical fan stuff. Because when Ole Miss goes up to the Palace on the Plains next year, it could be a different story completely. And I understand that. But Oklahoma is a legit program. It's a fun program. It is one of those programs that you're just happy that is showing up on your campus. And you get to show off. And this is that game, and they made it at 11 o'clock in the morning. That's upsetting. Them making it at 11 o'clock in the morning is almost unforgivable. But Oklahoma on the offense, they're struggling. They're on the struggle bus, man. Seth Luttrell just got fired as offensive coordinator, replaced by Joe John Finley. Again, I think that Oklahoma is going to try to run the ball, not necessarily for it to work, because you're going to have trouble doing that against Ole Miss no matter who you are. I think Georgia's going to have trouble running the ball against Ole Miss this year. But it's to establish culture. And I think they're going to do things to protect the offensive line in certain ways. I think Kentucky's offensive line is a little bit better than what Oklahoma's is. Oklahoma is next to last in the NCAA in sacks. They're only converting 25% of the third downs. They have the lowest or next to lowest explosive play percentage in the entire country. It's not good. And when you look at Ole Miss being second in the nation in scoring defense, when you look at Ole Miss as 7th in the nation in sacks, and 2nd in the nation in tackles for loss, you can see why Joe John Finley is going to work as hard as he's going to work to protect that offensive line. All right. When we come back, we're going to get into the comments and we're going to keep talking for a couple of more minutes. Stick around for it. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Ole Miss is favored by 20.5 points against the Oklahoma Sooners right now, despite the over-under being at just 48.5. That's like 34-14 or 35-14 at Ole Miss. And honestly, that type of game kind of makes sense if you think about it. So if you get the hunch in the middle of the game to do something else or something kind of rings your fancy, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same place where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right. So really interesting stuff. We're going to talk about this. We have a couple people in the chat that we're going to have up and see what they have to say. And we're just going to continue to talk about this football game. Again, like I said, I have no ill will against the Oklahoma Sooners in any way whatsoever. I'm actually very happy that Ole Miss is getting to play them, but that is because of basically where they sit as a program. They've essentially ran the Big 12 for the last 25 years. I understand that. They are not having a good year in the SEC, but that isn't because of the big bad SEC. That is because of a miscalculation by their offensive coordinator at their offensive line. That is why Oklahoma is struggling. It's not because they don't have talent. It's not because they don't have scheme. It's not because they don't do anything like that. It was because of a misevaluation of offensive line talent coming into the SEC and this being a completely defensive line, offensive line, trenches league. Texas learned as well, by the way, about trenches league going against a motivated Georgia Bulldogs over the weekend. And they saw exactly what it looks like when Georgia decides, hey, this other team can beat us. And Georgia just went in there and dominated them. Quinn Ewers was basically wanting to quit. So this league can be difficult if your trenches are not where it needs to be. Oklahoma had some misevaluations. And because of that, Ole Miss has a matchup that they can exploit. I mean, that's as simple as this betting line right here. Is Ole Miss has a legit matchup that they can exploit. That's all it is. Jackson Arnold's a really good quarterback. I saw him at the Under Armour All-American game 2 years ago. Really good quarterback. You could tell that this guy had all the goods and everything you could want. But they don't have that trench play, which means that essentially Oklahoma is what Ole Miss traditionally has been. Great skill players all over the field. But the offensive and defensive line wasn't quite right. And because of that, winning was problematic in this league. That's all it is. It's not any statement about Oklahoma or anything like that. I know there's going to be fans that want to talk about the big bad SEC. That's not it. It's just because they had some misevaluations. Trevin Ward says my Sooners can't drive the ball down the field. We in a one-legged ass-kicking contest. Yeah, they're having a rough year, but it's just one of those things. Like I said, it's all misevaluations. That's all it is. It isn't a situation to where Oklahoma, they should have known better. Just it was misevaluations on the offensive line and injuries. Defensively, they are really good. Defensively, they've sacked the quarterback 27 times this year. That's good enough for second in the country, I believe. Ahead of Ole Miss, who's currently 7th. They can play defense. Danny Stutzman is a really good really good linebacker, not question. I think his name's Brian Bowen or something like that in the safety, the All-American. He's a really good player as well. There's defensive players that are playmakers on this team, and Jackson Dart needs to be in a good shape. Okay. He needs to mind his P's and Q's and take care of the ball because this Oklahoma defense is opportunistic. They create turnovers, either interceptions or fumbles. Now, a lot of that could just be that Temple kept giving them the football, but according to the stat sheet, they are plus whatever they are in the turnover margin, and they're one of the leaders in the entire country. And on top of that, it tells you how bad their offense has been, that they could be in the shape they're in. Now, Oklahoma's 4-3. They're playing for a bowl game. They're legit playing for a bowl game right now. They need 2 more wins with a schedule that is weird, let's say. They have Arkansas still on it. They have Missouri still on it. I think they have Ole Miss and they have Alabama, something like that. You need to find 2 wins out of those or 1 win out of those, and then they play like Samford or some FCS program or low G7 type program. So Oklahoma, they've got stuff to play for and stuff that they will play for. So just don't take them lightly, handle everything, enjoy this game because this is a big moment for Ole Miss having Oklahoma come into your stadium. It just is. Jack Speed says, Stephen, good luck with your ABC 24 on Saturday. I'm sure you'll do well. That's actually on Thursday. Thursday is my ABC debut. And we will talk about the Oklahoma Ole Miss game as well. Should be a lot of fun. And I like the fact that ABC 24 is the home of the SEC currently. And because of that, it should be awesome. I talked to him today. I was really excited. I was probably too excited, if we're going to be honest about it. But this is just a really, really cool situation. I'm really excited about all of that. This is a big football game. It's 11 o'clock in the morning on ESPN on October 26th. Coming right out of game day. Game day is going to be in Bloomington, Indiana. Can you believe we live in a world that Indiana is a dominant football program? Duke is very good. Vanderbilt, Army, and Navy are ranked. And also, speaking of which, the All-American Bowl in San Antonio, the high school all-star game, is now the Navy All-American Bowl. Used to be the U.S. Army game. Now it's the Navy game. So I guess it's a go Navy type situation. Maybe they're trying to make a ploy at my heartstrings, but I hate to break it to the Navy All-American game. The Under Armour All-American game is like an hour up the road. So it's pretty easy for me to show up at that. And I'm looking forward to showing up at that this year as well. So should be pretty fun. I do appreciate everybody letting me ramble a little bit. I'm glad we got to a couple of comments. We are going to have the SEC squad show. I'm filming that tonight. It's going to be Thursday night. We're going to have Bill Flowers tomorrow night. Friday, we'll have Tom Vanderford. Saturday morning, we'll have Michael Katz. The pregame show will be with John Macon Gillespie. And then we will have the instant overreaction immediately after the ball game. We got a couple more comments in here as well. I think Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny needs to be back on the Friday night movie watching. You know, Gail, you might be right about that. I think Dial of Destiny needs to return. You are absolutely correct there. For those that do not know, good things happen when I watch Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It just does. Rex Thompson, I see the Rebels getting right on Saturday. I kind of do too. This isn't a get right game because Oklahoma is too talented, but this is kind of a get right game. And Lee Bird says, Ole Miss by 40, Boomer Sooner. And if you're going to Oxford, by the way, just so everybody knows, legendary Ajax Diner on the square, if you can get in there. Reservations are pretty much hard to do anything at the moment. But if you want to watch the game and you can't get into the stadium, the library, Funkies, all of this stuff on the square, you should be able to find a table and a good place to watch the game. The food down there is absolutely terrific, and you will have a great time, even if the Grove is not as busy as it could be. So it should be pretty good. Will says, forget the noise and play football. He is absolutely correct. Forget the noise and play football. There is honestly no noise. The fan base, from what I've seen, is very much on play football mode. They've kind of turned the page finally. But last week was pretty rough. It was pretty rough. Lee Bird says, I appreciate it. Looking forward to your guys' venue. It's very nice. It's an old stadium. The stadium was built in 1911. So don't expect the stadium to be overly nice, but the campus is nice. The campus is one of the best campuses in all of college sports. So it should be really good. But that is like what the Oklahoma fans need to know. Stop by any Grove tent that you're in Oxford. You'll probably be greeted with hospitality, and they'll tailgate with you. The hospitality of the Grove is legendary. Enjoy that. Take advantage of that. I am sorry again, Oklahoma fans, that you have to come to Oxford for an 11 o'clock kickoff. I was hoping for 2:30. I was hoping for 7 o'clock. I was hoping for you to truly experience Oxford in the Grove. Now you're going to get a B- version of it. Still going to be good, and we'll see how it goes. Mark Wall says, if we went out, can we get into the playoffs? Get Georgia is going to be trouble. If Ole Miss wins out, they're going to make the playoffs. Ole Miss is 18th right now, which means if they win the next two games, the first college football poll is available at that point. Ole Miss is going to come into that poll like 13th or 14th. And you need to get to 11 to make the playoffs. You beat Georgia, you're going to be 10th. You beat Florida, you're going to move up on the road. So you have a chance to be 8th or 9th if you went out, honestly. So if that happens, you're going to make the playoffs. Should be pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to get off of here right now. Thank you very much for watching. Tune in for tomorrow's show. I think I talk a little bit more about this game, shockingly. Thursday, I'm going to have the Locked On Sooners guys on the podcast as well. And Friday, I'll tell you why Ole Miss wins. Should be pretty cool indeed. Anyway, take care. Hotty toddy, everyone.